Welcome to Measurably Better Learning, the podcast built for learning and development professionals. Whether you're an instructional designer, L&D professional, or corporate leader, get ready for insights and ideas that will transform your approach to learning, training, and development. So let's dive in. Welcome back, everybody. We have another interesting topic to talk about. This is actually part 2 of a 3-part series that we're doing on global learning. And the topic for today is set up for success. So this is meant to be highly practical. Yeah. And I think the two of you literally have 7 steps. Yeah. We're going to follow like a cookbook, right? If you are somebody who loves practical, this is the podcast for you. So let's start with the at the logical place. Let's start with step 1. And Lana, you want to begin by walking us through that?
Well, we always take stock of who our learner is. That's just a basic. But if you're working with a global audience, I suggest that you, in the learner profile, make a little note of what is their language and what is their culture. So include that specifically, be very specific about that. That will help you later on be able to make material that they can relate to.
Well, you said even, is English the second language? Are we translating or not? Because that actually makes a difference in how you develop it. But yeah, it's all the things we spoke about in the last podcast, are easy to talk about, and then you jump into a project because you need to get it done.
Right.
And so I think your very practical suggestion of noting exactly who your learners are is really important.
Do you really think that doesn't happen that often?
I don't know.
That learner profiles include their culture? I actually think it doesn't happen that often.
I do too. I do too, because I think time pressure and you have to move on and you have a checklist and there's time dates and stamps and you don't, and it's odd to think about, but it's sort of like making a meal and not really thinking about what you're going to eat at the end. You're just going to make stuff and hope it turns out good without really thinking about the people who are going to be sitting around the table. One might be a chef and the other one might be a 2-year-old. And so it really matters. But it in some sense it sounds so simple, but in another sense it's profoundly important and core to what we do. All right, so that's 1. How about what's step 2?
Identify your key stakeholders from each culture. And maybe stakeholder is not the exact term, but what I'm talking about is a representative that you can contact, have feedback from, a representative from each of your stakeholders from each culture.
And feedback not at the end of the process.
Right.
Because everybody hates that. You've already done all this stuff, and now you're just asking me to rubber stamp it. You mean in the process, asking them along the way, does this work, does it not, can we do it better? Yeah.
How would you roll this out? What ideas, what obstacles, like the whole thing. You just want to keep checking in with a person from each of your cultures.
And sorry, go ahead, Mary.
No, I'm sorry. Just a real, even like a small granular example. I was creating, again, some training for a group around the world, and I was using like a fast food analogy, and I just thought, well, that's dumb. Like, I have no idea what fast food is or looks like in that particular region.
Yeah, try a pizza in Japan.
Yeah, I know, exactly. So, but because I knew a few people, I could just send them a quick message, hey, like what would fit best here? And again, instantly, hopefully, a little more credibility, but I had to know who that person was to find out the answer.
But those people that you asked, how'd you know them?
Relationship.
Right. I mean, it's something that both of you have talked about in previous podcasts, is especially in the global context, building that solid, meaningful, non-transactional relationship where you can ask an honest question and you can get an honest answer, a real answer. Yeah. All right. So we've defined our audience. We're developing those relationships and getting feedback from the stakeholders. What's step 3?
We need to confirm our assumptions, and this is where we figure out how much we don't know, because some of the assumptions that we may have about other cultures and the employees that work there and what their needs are may not actually be true. So it's really important to confirm your assumptions. For example, if you're planning on something being in English, well, how strong is their English as a second language? Is it really viable to make them go through training in English?
Yeah.
You need to understand place to place, processes aren't carried out exactly the same.
Right.
So if you're training on a certain process, maybe that doesn't work in their location.
Or it could be their laws are different than our laws. Let's say it's a regulatory thing or, a safety or compliance thing. Compliance in one area very likely is very different than your own context. That happens to us all the time. It happens in the development work too. One of the things that fascinated me early on as we started to do work with more and more international companies, it's a simple thing, but the significance of the color red. Mm-hmm. And it was so fascinating to me. It was actually I was on with our colleagues Nathan and Adam, and they were talking about the meaning of red in different cultures. And I was like, again, totally would have assumed that red is universal. Absolutely not. It's pretty fascinating. What else, Miriam? Anything to add on before we take our break on confirming assumptions, because we have so many of them? It's natural for us to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I think the one you pointed out with ESL learners is actually really accurate, because we can do that learner profile at the beginning. Oh, great. Okay, check the box. But if I'm doing a very, very technical training, maybe that proficiency is not good enough to understand that. Or I think now, for example, we are developing, again, some leadership training largely coming out of Europe. Mm-hmm. I really don't how do those sort of ethical, things that are being put in that.
And which part of Europe, right?
Right. And do they really play well in other parts of the world or not? And we're working with the client, to try and figure out what that is. But there's just confirming those assumptions. It's big. Yeah. It's really big to make sure you do that.
All right. Well, we'll take our break and we will come right back.
Imagine a world where every training session, every learning module, and every translated document is aligned with your company's unique goals and global ambitions. Welcome to Ingenuity, where we don't just talk about elevating your corporate learning, we make it happen. At Ingenuity, we understand the heart of your business is its people. That's why we specialize in creating custom learning solutions and translation services that are not just effective, but are designed specifically for your business's global needs. Let us show you how learning cannot be just better, but measurably better, with solutions tailored just for you. Learn more in the description below.
3 down, 4 to go. Welcome back, everybody. Number 4 is consider the limitations of your learners. And we've talked about this somewhat at the very beginning in defining your learners, but the two of you have decided to call this out specifically. What do you mean by determining the limitations of your learners?
Well, you want to consider what obstacles might your global community face.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
What would be a struggle for them? You want to take into consideration something that might be a hardship, like maybe they have lack of technology. Maybe they don't even have an email address. Maybe their education is not such that this level of training would be easy for them, or the language that you're using. Consider what they view as far as mentee and mentor.
Right.
Like that changes culture to culture.
Yeah.
So just try to be thinking through and asking questions. What would make this training opportunity fail?
Right. That's been 2 decades ago, but I had a very good friend. I've been to his house in Zambia. He's been to my house here, and we're very close friends. But I was very frustrated with him early on when email became available, because I would email him and it would take him 2 days to respond to me, and it was frustrating. Mm-hmm. Finally, I brought it up to him, and he said, I have an 8-hour bicycle ride to get to the point where I have internet.
Right.
And I felt like an idiot. I was like, oh, I can't believe I did. I made a huge assumption there. No idea of the limitations that he was facing or what it took for him to actually respond to my email, which for me was like opening whatever, 45-pound laptop I was using at the time. So yeah.
Well, even I think electricity. And again, I think
Sure.
sometimes we make assumptions. Oh, well, it's corporate training, right? And so, the company is providing the standard laptop, and so maybe that's not an issue. Yep, they have a laptop or they have access to the apps that they need, or we assume that. But there's huge parts of the world now where there's still rolling blackouts at different times, and like maybe they have the tool, but they can't do anything with it for now.
Yep.
Or especially I think with work from home and that kind of thing, they might not actually be in an office setting, or even if they are, they're still rolling blackouts or whatever the situation might be. It's just,
or you can even do something simple like put in animation or a training little section on YouTube, and then not really consider
blocked.
the fact that that country blocks all of it.
Yes.
And so there's all sorts of limitations. All right, let's move on. If we do it right, learning experiences can be designed to reinforce and align, and I think align is really a key word. Align cultural objectives. So let's talk about identifying cultural objectives. What do you mean by that?
Well, we all know what learning objectives are. We may even have considered business objectives and aligning to business objectives, but I don't know that we consider often the implications to culture. Certainly every learning opportunity will impact your learning culture positively or negatively, but there's even a broader culture within your organization that it can align with. So you can align to vision and values. You can bring everyone together as you standardize terminology, standardize roles. You're creating unity. And this is a really important, it's something that I get excited about because you can have a benefit to the culture of your organization, both learning culture and as a whole.
Well, I think even too, we've worked with a couple recently, organizations who have said, we want to make this fun. And we don't often get that freedom. Let's make some characters, but they had some fun with them. And again, that says to your employees in your organization, we value enough that, we want to keep this lighthearted as an organization.
Right.
We value having fun together. And that came through right through the training. And what a great way to create that sort of, like you said, that unity.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to number 6. The sixth step is something we have a lot of experience with, the idea of design for translation, which if you've done this before, you know this. If you've not done this before, which many people have not, there's a particular way of designing in English or whatever first language you're going to use, and account for. And again, you speak Russian. And so that's a significant challenge. So let's talk about some practical steps for thinking through how we actually design in step 1 so that in step 2, the translation process and subsequent design will be better.
Yeah, I always tell people if you think that you might translate this material, it'd be helpful for us to know at the get-go, because it really does make a bit of difference how you design from the beginning. You want to make sure that your stories and your language and your scenarios are going to translate well. So what that means is humor is very hard to translate.
Yeah.
Exaggeration is also hard. Idioms, of course, is difficult. So just being aware of the limitations of translation and making it adaptable is important. It's surprising how much internal language organizations start to use. And especially acronyms. Acronyms are kind of tricky. How do you translate acronyms? So starting a list from the beginning of these internal phrases that may prove tricky to translate is always helpful. Gathering stories that will relate to a bunch of different cultures or people.
So almost getting to the universal truths, commonalities,
Yes.
right? Things that are, and again, entertainment. There are some movies that work really well in the U.S. and some movies that work really well globally. And the global ones are always the ones that are somehow touching something above one individual culture.
I like to use metaphors that maybe are more nature related,
Oh, that makes sense.
that people would be able to relate to, or human nature related, and as you said, not tied to a particular society.
Yeah.
But all of these things, it's just making your content ready for translation makes it easier in the long run.
Okay. And then the final step, I think, Miriam, I'm just going to ask you, if I can, and how do we make ourselves smarter? Right? How do you do this? How do you get a deeper sense of cultural diversity?
Yeah, I mean, I think that so often, like what I look at or hear or see in the industry just sort of scratches the surface. We always do that whole like images, pictures, idioms, and like, we have to be better than that. We work with global companies all around the world all the time. And so we have written several articles that we can either found at our website or we can make available with the podcast. But there's articles that, talk about like when cultures collide, leading with cultural intelligence, things like that really help us think a little more deeply and give, again, I think to your example of even we have ESL, right? So they're speaking English, but like to what degree? And does the pace need to be shorter or the length need to, like that's a deeper level now we're talking about in terms of just understanding the picture more fully. Yeah. So we'll make some of those available. And we have a lot of them available on our website as well.
Good. And great resources all around the world.
Yes.
On this. This is not a place where there's no research. All right. Well, thank you both. And I look forward to part 3 of this conversation.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up the show, if you're looking to dive deeper, we've got tons of free downloads, L&D resources, and details about upcoming webinars that you won't want to miss. They're found in the episode description. Plus, if you ever want to chat with either one of us, now's your chance. You can find links in the episode description to connect directly with Miriam or me. We're here to answer your questions and to discuss all things learning and development. And speaking of questions, we love hearing from you. Whether it's a question or a comment or a topic you're curious about, or if you just want to join the conversation, drop us a comment on your favorite social media channel. Your input shapes our shows. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. It's the best way to ensure you never miss out on our latest episode. We're excited to continue to transform learning into a measurable success with you. Until next time.